our fourth in a series of the check-ins every 6 months with the BPDA on the progress since the City Council and DHCD's approval of the Urban Renewal extension in August of 2016. So we are pleased to be joined by Director Golden and many of his colleagues who will walk us through a rather sizable presentation. I've been trying to, oh, sorry, I have more stuff to go through. My name is Michelle Wu. I'm chair of this Planning, Development, and Transportation Committee. I do want to remind everyone that this public hearing is being recorded and broadcast live on channels Comcast 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 1964, as well as being live streamed on the City of Boston website. So please silence your cell phones and other devices. We are going to take public testimony a little bit before the panel, and then after the panel as well. We'll open it up to anyone who wishes to speak. If you are interested, please make sure to sign in on the appropriate sheet close to the door. And at the start of your testimony, please state your name, address, and affiliation, and try to keep it to 2 minutes or less. Today's hearing, again, is on the biannual update, and I want to welcome my colleagues, District City Councilor Ed Flynn and City Councilor at Large Anissa Sabi-George, and would offer them the chance to make an opening statement at this time.
I don't have anyone at this time.
I just briefly will say thank you, Councilor Wu, for hosting this and for all of you being here. I will have to sneak out at some point, and then I will be back. So if you miss me for a few minutes, I will be back. Thank you, Councilor Wu.
Okay. And Councilor Flynn?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Wu. And I'll just make a brief opening statement. I just want to say thank you for your leadership on this issue, and just want to say thank you to the BPDA staff as well for working closely with the City Council, and we appreciate your time and efforts on this important issue. And we also are proud to have a good group of people in the audience that care and are dedicated, know the history of Boston very well, and they're dedicated to the people of Boston, the neighborhoods of Boston. So we want to welcome our guests as well. So thank you, Councilor Wu.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. District Councilor Lydia Edwards has also joined us. Councilor Edwards, would you like to make a statement?
Very brief. So thank you so much for coming to continue that I think is a very important conversation. All of Charlestown happens to be in the Urban Renewal, and we're definitely feeling the impact of that investment. And I think what's really important for us is to really to again have a modern definition of what it means to be both urban and what we're renewing. And I appreciate this packet that you're coming with. I really do. I think this is actually a good conversation to have. I look forward to really talking and redefining that and making sure then, again, that in however we define this and how we're moving forward, it's community-led, and that we're building neighborhoods and building community while we're also making sure that we're building a very modern city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. And now I'd like to recognize Councilor Josh Zakum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank you for your work, both the previous term as Council President and in this committee on having these hearings and bringing these folks from the BPDA community and our council together to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable as a city on how we're developing and how we're using the extraordinary powers that the BPDA does have, and make sure we're doing it in a way that is beneficial to the city now and in the future. I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zakum. So as mentioned, we'll begin with about 5 to 10 minutes of public testimony to start. And the first person signed up is Ken Flynn. Ken will be followed by Ford Cavallari and Elliot Laffer. And if you could... You could stand at either one of these podiums.
Myself, my attorneys, with his staff, and
Thank you. My name is Ford Cavallari. I appreciate the time. I'm the chair of the Alliance of Downtown Civic Organizations, which is an umbrella group representing the 9 largest downtown neighborhood associations for the city of Boston. We, as many of the councilors will remember, were involved in the discussions 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, when the BPDA was going for the extension of the urban renewal zones. Our going-in position was that we thought that the urban renewal zones really needed to be sunsetted rather than extended, but we all, through a bunch of committee meetings and testimony, the City Council came up with a compromise with Michelle's leadership that there would be a 6-year extension, which we were comfortable with. And DHCD issued a memo on August 3rd, which basically stipulated, in addition to the 6-year extension, 2 stipulations were within 2 years of the date of approval, which was August 3rd, 2016, all of the land disposition agreements will be cataloged. Now, I'm confident if this meeting is like the rest of the meetings that we'll see yet more details of more LDA stuff that has been cataloged. And it's nice that that's ongoing. It's a little behind schedule. But, I don't want to browbeat on that. But what I do want to point out is that I think this stipulation of the 2 years getting the LDAs, the inventory together, is important. But it's actually not the most important thing in this control document that DHCD issued. They also stipulate in 3 years, which is coming up really fast, and I want to read this, within 3 years of approval of this approval, BRA will submit to DHCD a proposal for what the BRA intends to do with its urban renewal plans over the remaining 6 years of the extension, describing, with respect to each urban renewal plan, a timetable for sunsetting, an analysis as to whether the urban renewal plan should remain as drawn, and a framework and timetable for action. I have concern that in our zeal to be enthusiastic about the slow progress of the LDA inventory, we're not going to hit the more important milestone that in 3 years from the date, so that is August 2019, there needs to be a plan, not just formulated for the first time, but with buy-in, with discussion, with advice and counsel from the City Council, and hopefully with a community input process that's as rich and as far-reaching as the community input process that you guys ran during the socialization of the 10-year of the extension that you guys were seeking. You were seeking 10 years, you received 6. So we think that this 3-year midpoint plan is really, really important, and I'm concerned that we have not yet begun the discussion of how that's going to come into place. And we as the community groups in downtown are very interested and, in fact, expecting that there'll be some community voice that comes into the process. And I just wanted to say that as my opening comment. I will defer to the BPDA to hear what they have to say, but I'm hoping to hear a lot more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ford. Elliot.
Madam Chair, members of the council, I don't have a formal statement, but I want to raise a couple of things. My name is Elliot Laffer, and I'm speaking as an individual who's been involved with BPDA and BRA reviews since I think I was in knee pants. And so I think I have a pretty good handle on how the process has worked, and there are 2 concerns that I wanted to raise. One is that the BRA formerly, and hopefully not here, but it's a little scary because they're a little off right now, has a history of missing deadlines. And missing deadlines, making deadlines advisory. We always felt when we were going through the review process that we had to hit the deadlines because the BRA set them, but when they missed them, they just extended them. And that gets concerning because, the time goes on and on and on, and answers don't get resolved. The second thing is how important community process is. There are a great number of people in this city who have spent a lot of time as high-ranking amateurs working on development issues. And I think that we bring a lot of wisdom along with that experience, and I think that if the city doesn't involve us, it's a loss for the city and frankly, you know, we don't charge a whole lot, so I think that it's a very positive and economic thing, and my experience with community process is that when it's a vibrant process, everything that goes in certain shape comes out in better shape, and I think it's really, really important that be honored.
Thank you very much. So we'll pause on public testimony until after the panel, and now hand it over to, I wanted to recognize that Councillor Tim McCarthy has joined us as well. Councillor McCarthy, would you like to make any statement? Then we'll hand it over to Director Golden and the panel. We've been through this before and very much appreciate the presentation. So if you want to make any opening statements, and then let us know when to dim the lights.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you to the members. It's a pleasure to be back with you again this afternoon. We appreciate the opportunity to present again on the subject of our urban renewal efforts in accordance with the plan that we agreed to with the City Council 2 years ago. I'd especially like to welcome any new members of the Council to this conversation, which has been going on with the body as a whole for quite some time. I'd also like to recognize Chris McClave, who is the Deputy General Counsel and Hearings Manager for the Department of Housing and Development at the state, the DHCD. Chris is in the audience with us today. I've given this overview of our urban renewal efforts at previous City Council update sessions, but I'd like to briefly reiterate a few points for you and any constituent, councilor, or viewer who may be new to this ongoing work. Urban renewal dates back to the American Housing Act of 1949, when the federal government, after World War II, began to invest great sums of money to redevelop cities that were rapidly declining in the post-war period. The Boston Redevelopment Authority was created as Boston's urban renewal agency in 1957 at the request of then Mayor Hines to the state legislature. And since 1974, the state's DHCD has overseen urban renewal activities within Boston. While urban renewal has many negative associations, I'd like to stress a point that we've made frequently in our conversations in the community and with the council. Urban renewal today is a much different tool than it was in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and we as an agency exercise these powers in a much more nuanced and sensitive manner with an ear to the wants and needs of communities. Urban renewal provides us with a set of tools that encourages responsible redevelopment and revitalization of Boston's neighborhoods where, but for these tools, development may not have otherwise been possible. The powers are used to make blight findings, assemble parcels of land, clear title to establish clear ownership, establish land use controls for uses such as open space, and the promotion of affordable housing. As you may recall, the Boston City Council approved a 6-year extension of our urban renewal plans in March 2016. In April 2016, the Boston Planning and Development Agency's board approved an action plan, a requirement of the 6-year urban renewal extension, providing additional Boston City Council oversight of our urban renewal activity. Then on August 3rd, 2016, the State Department of Housing and Community Development approved our request to extend our urban renewal powers for another 6 years until the summer of 2022, allowing for the BPDA to move forward with this action plan. DHCD's approval came after we facilitated a robust 1.5-year-long public engagement process to inform residents of Boston about the history of urban renewal and to solicit feedback about the future use of these tools. This effort included over a dozen community workshops, public meetings before the Boston City Council, and a comprehensive website. As part of the DHCD and City Council urban renewal extension approvals, we agreed as an agency to provide you regular updates on the progress of our work. Today, we're pleased once again to provide you a fourth update regarding our activities. Joining me today are Renee Lefebvre, to my left, the General Counsel of the agency. To my right, Janet Carlson, First Assistant General Counsel, and Christopher Breen, to my far right. He's the Special Projects Manager on Urban Renewal. Some of you may recognize Chris from his previous role in the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, where he served as the neighborhood liaison to Charlestown. Chris joined this effort earlier this year to manage the day-to-day urban renewal work at the BPDA, and we're certainly delighted to have him on our team. I'd also like to thank Records Manager Nate Smith, GIS Senior Analyst Ala Ziskin, Web Content Manager Emily Ouija, Landscape Urban Designer Kenya Thompson, Senior Housing Compliance Manager Mary Lou Mendonça, Legal Assistants Joe Rose Bordeaux and Alec Bonelli, several legal interns, Allison Quinn, and our Urban Renewal intern Martin Serrano for their hard work and significant contributions. As you know, the majority of our work thus far has been centered around the Urban Renewal Land Disposition Agreement Inventory Project. These are the so-called LDAs. Through this effort, we've collected granular data in an attempt to present a comprehensive inventory of the LDAs and other restrictions on BPDA property and BPDA property that was conveyed to others. Since our first update in September 2016, we have presented 13 urban renewal areas to you. Today, we'll be presenting the final 3 urban renewal areas: the West End, Downtown Waterfront, Faneuil Hall, and Charlestown. Before I turn it over to Janet Carlson, I'd like to update you on the status of the commitments made in the action plan. First, regarding the minor modification procedures, which were a significant topic of conversation 2+ years ago, we're continuing to notify the City Council and the state DHCD of all minor modifications to our urban renewal areas. In accordance with the conciliation agreement for the South End, notification of minor modifications within the South End Urban Renewal Plan area are also extended to state legislators that represent those areas impacted by the relevant minor modifications. We've also been providing the City Council with digital copies of minor modification notices through email transmission. Second, in our ongoing efforts to be as transparent, accessible, and responsive as possible, we're continually updating our technology and website to best reflect our urban renewal activities. The presentations and links to the videos of our last 3 City Council updates are available on our website. We've provided a link that allows any member of the public to directly generate an inquiry about any urban renewal matter to Chris Breen, who will more actively be able on a daily basis to help with any specific question regarding urban renewal. We've also in recent weeks adopted a program and software called Box, a new digital content management system, which will enable us to digitize all of our documents collected during this research phase so that they're easily accessible to our staff to respond more quickly to inquiries from the public. And tomorrow, we'll be launching a new urban renewal page that will provide a user-friendly table linking to urban renewal plans, modifications, notification letters, and maps. As we complete our data searches, our interdisciplinary team at the agency has been working to add urban renewal information to the BPDA's online zoning viewer. This team is actively working to ensure that this online tool is functioning optimally before it goes live. Third, the 2016 action plan asks that we examine our existing procedures for the disposition of BPDA-owned land and to revise protocols accordingly in such a manner that reflects community planning goals and priorities. All land dispositions involve a community process that solicits feedback from the surrounding neighborhood stakeholders. This feedback is then incorporated into community planning goals and priorities. Over the past 2 years, we've gone through thousands of documents, prioritizing accuracy and thoroughness to ensure that we've laid the best foundation for the next steps and significant work ahead. While this has taken longer than we'd hoped, we believe the high quality of our work to date will translate into better results for the citizens of Boston for many years to come. Now, over the next few months, we'll be working closely with our planning and real estate departments to ensure that we catalog and develop a plan by which to manage, dispose, retain, or redevelop our land assets with the same due diligence as the work we've done over the past 2 years. We look forward to sharing the results of that work soon. We are as committed to a transparent, accessible, and responsive public engagement process to inform residents of Boston about our progress and next steps as we are to working diligently to meet the commitments in the existing action plan. Looking forward to the next milestones in our action plan, our community engagement strategy regarding a timetable for sunsetting urban renewal plans, reevaluating boundaries, making recommendations for modifications to existing urban renewal plan areas, and exploring the notion of new urban renewal plan areas will be informed by the results of our work and due diligence to date and over the next few months. We'll be working with the DHCD at the state level to ensure that they are aware of our progress and to coordinate expectations and timelines. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Janet Carlson from our Office of General Counsel for the formal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Janet,
Good afternoon,
do you have
everyone.
you have a clicker
Oh, yes,
already?
I do.
Okay, great.
I can get it. Okay, so I'm going to do the last of the LDAs, but first I'm just going to go through, and so I'm going to do the prior ones first so that if anyone wants to look for a specific urban renewal area, they know which one to look at. As Brian said, the presentations are online now, so people can go back to them and watch them. And then I'm going to update the last 3 project areas. Okay, so let's see, the first, I want to just briefly go over, these were the original urban renewal areas. Several have already expired. These are the existing ones. We have 16 at the present time. These are the expired urban renewal plan areas, you can see. And then we laid over the existing urban renewal areas with the city council districts, so you could see whose district they're in. So in the updates, in update 1, we covered the Central Business District School Franklin, the Central Business District Boylston Essex, and Brunswick King. For the number 2 update, we did the Central Business District South Station, North Station, Government Center, and South End. The last one we did had Park Plaza, South Cove, Fenway, Campus High School, Kittredge Square, and Washington Park. And today, we will be doing West End, Downtown Waterfront, Faneuil Hall, and Charlestown. Now, we're going to start with West End. And before, this is the West End plan originally, and before I start, I just want to say something about this area. This was created in 1957, and since it's one of our early plans, the way they did the dispositions was quite different than the other areas. They basically leased out the land with options to purchase. And when they purchased the land from us, the leases became restrictions. They, in effect, became an LDA. So you aren't looking necessarily with the older ones of these for land disposition agreements. You're looking at the leases for the restriction language. This is on the present day assessing map. This is where the boundaries are and the different areas. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of go through all of them. The older ones, as I said, that were dispersed with leases and then options to purchase. The newer ones, you'll have a few land disposition agreements. So this first one is Emerson Place, and it is commercial and residential buildings, and they did large transfers when they did this. And on parcel 1B, we have Whittier Place, which also has a few buildings. It's residential. Blossom Court, this picture is actually the backside of Blossom Court. If you go around the other side, it's got the commercial areas. So this is commercial. It's got like sandwich shop, let's see, nail place, and dry cleaning, I think. And then there's offices above. Then there's Hawthorne Place. This was another large transfer. And these all had leases that became restrictions. Charles River Plaza also had medical buildings put on top. This is where the Whole Foods is. And that was done with a lease. Next to it is what used to be the Holiday Inn. Hotel is now Wyndham. Now we're going to jump to the other side. We're going to go by numbers, so we're jumping over to Martha Road. This is on the back side. This is Amy Lowell House, which is affordable. The next one, this is a land disposition agreement. This was one of our later transfers, occurred in the 90s, and there's a land disposition agreement. There are several tiers of affordability. It's also got the West End Museum in it. Going back to the leases that turned into restrictions, this picture here is just a portion of Area F and FA. It also includes the residential buildings behind it, and it also is where the garden garage is going up, which used to be the parking garage. It's a huge area of land. This is the Mass Ioneer. Formerly, we gave it to the Retina Foundation. Oops, I went too fast here. Oh, sorry. This one, we never owned the whole parcel. We just gave slivers next to the library and the Charles River Park, but we did transfer sliver parcels. Then, of course, the West End Library, which is a public parcel. That was on an Urban Renewal parcel, and that was transferred by deed. This is the Regina Cleary residence, and this is parcel 7, 7A, 7B. Blackstone, now we're jumping back down to Blossom Street, kind of next to the, down the street from the hotel, the Wyndham Hotel. This is it's affordable housing for elderly and disabled people. The Shriners Hospital for Children is on parcel 8. MGH, MGH has one big parcel, so when we put that we have a restriction on it, it looks like the whole parcel is restricted, but if you can see, we only gave them a little corner, which is actually the down ramp to their loading area, and that's all we gave them. This is the synagogue, which is back behind some of the housing buildings. And lastly, we gave to the MDC the area for the overpass over Starrow Drive. So what do we have left to do on West End? For the most part, it's certificates of completion for those things under construction. There's a few under construction. There is some affordability. Mainly, the only affordability restricted by us is in West End Place, as well as we acquired some affordability in Emerson Place by virtue of some off-site units that we received, and they will need to be extended after the 30-year period is up. Okay, the next one we're going to do is downtown waterfront.
Janet, maybe can we pause there? I
Yes.
just want to offer colleagues a chance to ask questions specifically on this urban renewal area, particularly
Okay.
the district councilor,
Okay?
Councilor Zachem, unless Councilor Flynn or others have questions on the West End as well.
I had one question on that.
Okay, we'll go in
Okay.
order then. Thank you. Councilor Flynn.
Okay. I had one question on slide, page 22, 50 Stanford Street.
Yes.
Can you talk about the garage that you mentioned that is also part of that?
Oh, it's not under this one. It's the garden garage, it's down by Lamosny Way. But if you looked at the parcel, it goes from here all the way down. So the garden garage is actually down in this area of
Okay.
Area F. Yeah, they are doing construction here, but it's just the entrance.
Okay.
It was approved by us last year. And that's one we'll have to give a certificate of completion on eventually when they're finished.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
You good, Counselor Flynn?
Yeah, I'm good here.
Thank you, Counselor Flynn.
Wu.
Counselor Edwards, you good? Counselor Zachem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'll be brief. We've, in the last 5 years, discussed our different opinions on the garden garage plenty of times, so I will not raise that again today. But I do have a question about the Amy Lowell House. That is something we've talked about with D&D and others, but it is an all-affordable housing building that is expiring in the next few years. It's not imminent. I believe it's within the next 6 years, which, while it might seem like a long time to us, is a very short amount of time for the residents there. And given its location, given the fact that this is an urban renewal parcel that I think we need to be making sure is beneficial to the city, I would put to you as the BPDA, what your agency can do to address the expiring use there independently, and what other thoughts you might have. And, you know, off the top of your head, whatever maybe direct authority that we still have or you all still have over this parcel, but I'd also like to put it, you know, in your inbox, so to speak, about thinking about this, you know, hundreds of units, downtown, you know, transit-oriented, close to medical centers that are really important for a community there.
Okay, we'll have to do research and work with Sheila at D&D. I've got the documents.
If you don't worry about pressing anything, Carrie will adjust it from the back if you just start
Thank you,
speaking.
sorry. So a couple things on that. First of all, I guess what we'd be looking at is, and I don't know if we know off the top of our head, does the LDA require perpetual affordability on the site?
So the LDA probably mentions affordability, but not in a way that we could keep it restricted. I think we're going to have to work with D&D to come up with a solution.
Okay, so perhaps the LDA does not afford an additional layer of protection beyond the term of the expiring use mortgage. As you know, this is a phenomenon we deal with all over the city. They're ticking time bombs. They're 40-year mortgages often. When they come due, the owner can move them to market rate. So in a situation like that, if we do not retain regulatory power that is effective in addressing that issue with regard to LDAs or any other kind of regulatory agreement on formerly BPDA parcels, we work very closely on a regular basis with the city's Department of Neighborhood Development to see if we can either come up with a program or some other kind of arrangement with the existing owner or a new owner to maintain affordability. And we've had some really significant successes in that regard. Obviously, the ultimate protection is with a mission-oriented owner who is in the business of affordable housing, and that's why they own it. But to the extent we're not dealing with that, we very aggressively enter into conversations to make sure that affordability is preserved and displacement is prevented.
No, and I understand this isn't a unique situation in the city of Boston. We had a bunch in the Fenway neighborhood also. I was happy to work with the Fenway CDC, D&D, state agencies, and others to preserve not a BRA parcel, but in the Fenway just last year, the Burbank Gardens, nearly 50 units of affordable housing. But this stands out to me in that it was an urban renewal zone. It's something that, my understanding is that we do not have an LDA that permanently restricts it. There is an added responsibility, I think, from your agency to see what we can do to make this permanently affordable for the people, I mean, the current residents even, many of whom are currently putting up with major disruptions, once again, from the Garden Garage project next door, and have lived there and really have no other place to go. And I think, I don't want to belabor the point, but I would like to hear, it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but sometime in the near future, what your review of any sort of leverage the city or your agency would have on maintaining the affordability there, and if not that, what thoughts we can start working on, because a few, 5 or 6 years could be a lifetime in this building sometimes when we're talking about these issues, because things are happening every day. It is coming up, and I'd like to put that on there. Other than that, I think things, and I think the residents in that neighborhood do feel that despite disagreements with the garden garage, the process and engagement from your agency has improved. It doesn't mean everything's perfect, but I do appreciate that, and I think we need to continue anything else moving forward to make sure that community is involved.
Thanks very much, Councilor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zakem. Janet, could you just say one more time? I sort of heard it, but I need help understanding. You said these are not LDAs, they're about leases because it was essentially a contract and then with an option to purchase, and most of the owners ended up purchasing them, and that's what happened?
Yeah, so what happened was this was started so long ago. So the later parcels that we transferred were transferred the way ones are done nowadays with land disposition agreements and deeds. But the early ones, for some reason, and this is the only area I've seen it, were like large swaths of land with leases on, with options of purchase built in. And then what it says is, it says when they purchase, everything goes away about the rent and stuff, but the restriction itself, and the way it restricts it is it ties it to the urban renewal plan. It doesn't specifically say it's going to be like residential, say to the terms of the plan, so then you have to go back to look at the plan and see what was allowed on that site. That's the way they were done. We've had a few problems with it in there where people think they're gone and they aren't reading the documents, and they think because they bought it, that restriction isn't there, but if it's very clear, if you read the leases, the restriction is still there.
And most of the restrictions are just around use, and
Their
rather
use.
than level of affordability or anything like that?
The affordability really isn't built into the urban renewal plan, so it's mainly use, like it would say residential.
Okay, so do any of the non-residential buildings, either the healthcare or the commercial, the small commercial building, do those have any, are those also restricted to that type of use as well?
No, the one, I think we were looking up Shriners, that actually has a land disposition on it.
Okay.
I can, like, if you want specifically, I can make a list of the parcels, and I can tell you which are leases and which were the later ones with LDAs. I didn't do it for this presentation, but we have folder files on everything now.
So, and I'm going to save most of my big picture questions for after to get to the other sections, but just for this one, for example, when there are relatively few LDAs and we sort of know what the uses are, is there a way to then kind of codify that in zoning and then remove the urban renewal and sort of retire or sunset this urban renewal map? Or what's the goal then, Amy, with this particular
I
one?
think you get more uses through zoning, right? You'd increase the uses. This is West End, yeah. I'm just saying that they're very specific, like there's only a few uses for each parcel listed in the urban renewal plan. I would think if you did a zoning, you'd get a lot more uses on it. I mean, I don't know if that would work, but.
Meaning our zoning code isn't as, or is more finely
It would give people
nuanced about-
options of doing other things with
Other-
their
right.
property. That's what I'm
see.
saying. I
Okay.
think the urban renewal restricts it more, if that's what you want, as far as use.
So let's just take one of the residential buildings, for example. Right now, urban renewal says the lease built into the purchase says it must remain residential, and that's basically all it says, right? No
Yeah.
other
They have
conditions on
commercial
that.
around the bottom. A lot of these buildings have commercial around the bottom.
Okay,
but
commercial on the
residential.
bottom and residential. And so what would happen if we tried to do that through zoning?
I don't know, it depends what they zoned it as.
Under the zoning, there would be an allowed use of both residential and commercial, and that building could possibly go.
Pure commercial. We could lose the residential if it were just governed under the zoning, because both uses would need to be allowed. So the urban renewal is more restrictive in that regard.
But I thought in Councilor Zakem's district, we had done something around restricting commercial only to certain levels, right? It wasn't about first floor couldn't be a certain type of commercial or?
That's in the adjacent zoning district,
Yeah.
so the Beacon Hill side of Cambridge Street, as well as Charles Street in Beacon Hill, so.
But there's a way to differentiate through zoning of what different floors could be even on the same parcel, right? We've done it before.
Depending on the zoning and what area you're in, and if, because it's all different. There's different articles for different neighborhoods as well.
But there would be a way if this were, or if there was a decision to sunset this map, for example, there would be a way to accomplish it through zoning.
Yes, I'm sorry. I think if the question is, could we adjust the zoning to accomplish these same goals? Yes, but it would require an amendment on the zoning.
Right. Okay,
But-
sorry, I
but
was
yes,
unclear in asking.
That
Yes,
is one of the
change to
tools
zoning code.
we could and maybe will use to address some of
Got
these
it.
issues that are currently being addressed by these other controls associated with the urban renewal
Yeah.
or the LDAs. But we could come at some of these through zoning amendments.
And is there a reason why there would be a desire to continue the urban renewal map if most of the land is already even sold completely, and we could keep the use attachments, or that there's not much development potential left there?
Sure. If we're working with the community process, obviously, and working with the council, if we came to the conclusion that either, the neighborhood or the urban renewal area, generally speaking, are pieces of it, there was no further need for these tools yet, I think we'd feel comfortable and we aspire to shedding some of this geography because we've accomplished the goals. So we're still in the fact-finding mode, what exactly is going on out there with regard to the LDAs and the regulatory controls, and how do we want to address it if it goes away? And that's when we'll be back to you with substantive recommendations going forward.
All right, thank you. I think unless there are further questions, we can go to the next map.
Okay, so the next one is downtown waterfront Faneuil Hall. This is it's hard to see the boundaries, but it basically up above hits Government Center, Urban Renewal, and then it's along the waterfront. And these are the parcels within, if you probably can see it better on your map, on your plan. Okay, I'm just going to show you a few. Now, we didn't own whole sites. Some of these, we just gave parts of the parcels, so don't think we owned everything. First one, Rose Wharf. We did not own everything. We owned parts of it. So that was Rose Wharf. We're going to go down along the waterfront. We have Harbor Towers. We owned parts of it. The next thing we did more recently was Frog Pond Foundation. We discontinued parts of streets and we made a park here. That's probably in the past 15 years, I'm guessing. There's the New England Aquarium, the Long Wharf Marriott Hotel. This one we own the whole parcel. Then Christopher Columbus Park was the urban renewal parcel, and next to it is the Rose Kennedy Garden. Okay, now this one, it looks like it's the park we still own, but behind this is a housing project, and that's what was the urban renewal project. Now, in the next two slides, you're going to, not this slide, the next two slides, you're going to see a series of, this slide, houses. We put them out for rehab. So basically, the building stayed, and they did rehabilitation on these. And so we have lots of LDAs on this one, like 20 or 30. North End Elderly, of course, you've all heard of that because of our urban renewal. Going over to the other side of the urban renewal area, over on the other side of the marketplace, this is 185 State, used to have our offices in it. We sold it, and it's been developed. Marketplace Center, which is at the end of the marketplace, is an urban renewal parcel. And then, of course, there's Quincy Market. On this, if you look at the plan, you can see a little notch. That's Durgan Park, was not part of it. And if you look at the map, if you look at the picture, there's a billboard on top because we don't control it. So just warn you, there is more control with urban renewal. Dock Square Garage is also in this urban renewal area. The Bostonian Hotel. And I'm not hitting every parcel. There's a couple more parcels on the other side of the Bostonian that are also urban renewal and LDA controlled. And then, of course, 60 State straddles Government Center and downtown waterfront. It's parcels 13 and 14 in Government Center and portions of E11 in downtown waterfront. Now, what do we have left to do here? We're working right now on the public realm. So with 60 State Street, there were supposed to be easements cutting through. You know how if you go up on the plaza and you cut through over to State Street, that was supposed to be an easement. We are actually getting those now. So they will be in place hopefully by the end of the year. And that's one of the public realm things that had to be done. Otherwise, it's probably certificates of completion. There's not really any housing. I don't think there's any deed-restricted housing that I can think of there. Did you want to stop here before I go
Yes,
on to
please.
Charlestown? Okay.
Thank you. Counselor Flynn?
Thank you. Thank you, Council. At Quincy Market, there's 3 buildings in Quincy Market. 2 of them are owned by the BPDA, and 1 is owned by the City of Boston.
That's the lease.
At Faneuil Hall, Councilor?
At Faneuil Hall.
So North and South Market, owned by the BPDA and leased to the current leaseholder, Ashkenazi Holdings. So that's North and South. The City of Boston actually owns the Central Marketplace, the central building, the main building of Quincy Market, but has leased it to the BPDA. And so now the BPDA is the lessee of the City of Boston, and the sublessee in that case is Ashkenazi Holdings. So while the agency is essentially owner of 2 out of the 3 buildings, the lease by Ashkenazi is for all 3 buildings, because we do have a leasehold interest and have effective 99-year ownership of the facility. So we've leased that. It's all one lease.
Does the City of Boston or BPDA own any other land in and around Quincy Market?
Actual ownership,
Trying to
current. The marketplace at the end going towards the Rose Kennedy Greenway
That was
was
sold.
originally owned, but was sold outright some years ago in the 90s, perhaps.
We might own under Commercial Street that goes between the marketplace and the Quincy Market, but that's basically a walkway. I don't know if we own developments you're talking about?
If there might be slivers over there, but nothing of significance that lends itself to development or redevelopment
Okay.
that we can think of.
What are the opportunities in the downtown area that BPDA is going to work to build some affordable housing in this neighborhood? I do see a lot of housing going up in the downtown area. I represent a good portion of this area. Going down Broad Street, there's several buildings that are going up, but is there an opportunity to build any affordable housing in that area?
Councilor, thank you for the question. We just kicked off a massive downtown planning exercise, first time maybe ever. We don't know when the last time there was a downtown granular planning exercise done. There was the general city plan done in mid-1965, but I'm sorry, in the mid-1960s, I think it was 1965. It wasn't granular parcel by parcel. This is going to be a far more granular exercise, and we're looking at the core downtown, extending over through Chinatown to the Turnpike, and coming through the financial district to the City Hall area. In that planning study, we're going to be looking at everything: height, density, uses, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, so that we have a brand-new planning study that informs brand-new zoning and brand-new uses in the core downtown. So that's something we're going to be looking very carefully at. And that process just got underway. We've committed significant resources to it. I think we've been very overt about our belief that if you look at the city's land mass, that the only place that really isn't a residential neighborhood or has a significant residential component is the financial district. So we're going to be looking at that are there good opportunities for residential development in the financial district? Can we identify them and plan for them? So I think you'll probably be pleased with some of that product. Again, it's just begun, but we certainly look forward to your input as well as neighbors' input with regard to where housing is best located and where affordable housing is most viable in the downtown neighborhood.
Okay. I know you briefly mentioned the planning study as it goes into Chinatown. I don't mean to get off track at all, but do you have any update on Mass Pike Towers that you could provide me with?
So Mass Pike Towers Council, I believe, was the expiring use building
Yeah.
in Chinatown, right near the Pike. And
Yeah, some issue with Trinity Management, the Trinity Company.
Correct. I was under the impression, Council, that probably information had been communicated. Have you ever
I haven't received anything recently.
Okay.
Recently. I don't know if there's any updates at all
Okay.
on that.
I don't. I know that we're working closely with the Department of Neighborhood Development
Okay.
and the owner/manager of that housing development to identify ways forward where the affordability is maintained. Because just as Councilor Zakim pointed out, this is another one of those buildings where affordability was only guaranteed for 30 to 40 years. I'm guessing this is a 40-year expiring use mortgage. So as soon as that mortgage expires, they could, in theory, if they chose to, move it to market rate. And again, this is one of the buildings that we're working with the developer. My bet is that we don't have an actual solution in hand yet, but I feel confident that both agencies of city government are engaging the owner of that development or the manager of that development to find a way forward that maintains affordability and avoids displacement of the existing residents.
Okay. Is there anything else in downtown or Chinatown that I should be aware of that could impact the quality of life of my residents, for my constituents, as it relates to affordable housing, quality of life issues as well?
I would say, and we may have discussed this, I'm not sure if we did the last time we presented to the council on the subject of urban renewal, but we're in the final stretches of negotiations with the respondent to our RFP for parcel 12, which is a BPDA-owned parcel on Tremont Street next to the Tufts Hospital garage down near the Weighing Center in the Theater District. Yeah. There is a developer seeking to do a significant mixed-use project, and our goal there, stated in the RFP, and the response to that RFP did address our demand and expectation that any development there commit to significant numbers of affordable units. So again, that project remains under review, but we are hoping that we can frankly score a significant win for the neighborhood with regard to the creation of housing and significant numbers of affordable units. Again, and that's all in addition to revitalizing what is now a BPDA-owned and operated parking lot. So we're expecting to add significant life, significant economic activity, and a lot of affordable housing to that parcel.
Thank you, and I just have one final question. I don't mean to monopolize the conversation. As it relates to Chinatown, there's a parcel of land that's owned by Mass DOT, the Reggie Wong athletic facility. It's next to the old Wang building, and off of the highway, but it's really the only outdoor athletic facility in Chinatown. There's volleyball courts, there's basketball courts, and there's outdoor space for people to play sports.
Right.
And my concern would be if that was developed by Mass DOT, that the residents of Chinatown would not have any athletic place to play sports. So that would be a concern of mine. So I just want to let BPDA know about that, that if this is developed, that there will be no opportunity for our community to play sports. Provides a tremendous service to the people of Chinatown and the Leather District as well.
I
So-
appreciate that, Counselor. In rest assured, a good thing going on right now, and I can only speak to my tenure in this job, but in recent years, the relationships between City Hall and the Boston Planning and Development Agency and the State Department of Transportation are quite healthy.
Okay.
We're involved in all of their planning efforts, and we involve them where they have equities in the conversation in ours. There's free-flowing communication back and forth. We welcome their voice and they welcome ours in planning and development decisions associated with state parcels. So if there was ever any interest in redevelopment, either on that site or more likely in the immediate vicinity, we'd be very focused upon protecting that key recreational space for Chinatown and the Leather District. So we'd be on it, and I'd like to think that if past as prologue in our relationship with DOT remains healthy as I expect it to, that they would be sensitive. They'd probably be sensitive to that need without our voice, but we'd certainly add our voice to that conversation for sure.
No, thank you. I appreciate that, Director. You know, in my neighborhood in South Boston, there's plenty of places for people to play sports. In the South End, there's plenty of places to play sports. And unfortunately, we just have one place in Chinatown. So if we lost that, that'd be a terrible impact on the neighborhood, on the quality of life of the residents. So I hear about it often. And not only do we need to keep it, we need to put money into it and fix it up and try to make it the best athletic location we possibly can. So I appreciate your support on that, and thank you for taking my questions, everybody.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Edwards.
To see some of the projects in the North End included, which are in the, well, Eddie and I share, Councillor Flynn and I share the North End, and so there's certain parts that I'm very happy to see that are brought up today. I wanted to specifically ask or note that at least with the Ausonia in the North End, that is permanently affordable housing, as that is run by the BHA. Is that correct?
It's not controlled by us.
Right.
Yes, if it's BHA until they develop it or something.
But, I'm sorry, is it BHA?
It is.
It is, okay,
It is.
sorry.
So that it's, I assume it's affordability. It will be in perpetuity as long as the BHA is part of that.
Exactly.
But my biggest concern, honestly, is the mercantile building. Specifically, and I have me and Representative Michaelwitz have been texting back and forth, and one of the questions that he and I both have is concerning the deed restrictions on the mercantile building. I think I have the page marked. It's page 44. And this is, I mean, with the priority being so much about affordability and assuring that folks can stay in Boston as part of the Urban Renewal. As you know, there was I believe, a 40-year deed restriction put on this for affordability that has come up. So now, this year and for the next for 3 years in total, but for this year and the next 2, the rents will go up 3% each year, and then it'll become fully market, which will displace a lot of deeply affordable individuals there. So,
That's what she's saying.
Sorry.
We're sorry, we're just trying to.
Sparked a conversation on this side of the table.
yeah, good, because this is
Yeah, we didn't know.
there's a genuine terror there for individuals who even the 3% increase isn't matching what they have on Social Security. They have diseases that prevented them from being able to walk around, let alone work. There's a genuine fear about where folks are going to go. They cannot afford to stay in Boston right now with the way the rents are. So here is an opportunity that seems to have been grabbed and also lost in this urban renewal conversation, when the goal has always been to have, or at least to prioritize, as Director Golden had said, affordable housing. And we're watching this ship slowly move away from us, and these individuals will be displaced. This is not a matter of question. So this is, so I wanted to ask about that and that particular building, and how urban renewal is lost that opportunity, or how there can be something done in your review to help protect these individuals. And then you can also, after that question, answer what we're doing in general with 13A buildings that are in urban renewal districts, and how you've dealt with them before when they're coming out of the deed restriction.
First of all, I'll have to review the documents for that, because I didn't know that issue. So we'll have to pull it out and review the documents. But then I think it's an expired use in this thing.
So I'm sorry, I'm aware of the fact that it is an expiring use. I did not know the second piece of the story, which is that the expiring use deadline has come.
It's come.
Already, and
Yep.
that the owner, our property manager, is escalating the rents and bringing them up to market.
Part of the agreement that they had is after it becomes expired use, there's a 3% gradual, I guess, on all of them, that 3%, 3%, 3% for 3 years, and then it goes to market. So that's just not specific to this property. I believe it's for deed restrictions, and especially 13As. So there's a policy and systemic question that we need to have answered with urban renewal and its dedication. If you're going to have this kind of stewardship given to your agency to deal with urban renewal, and you are doing your accounting and your auditing and whatnot, there needs to be a conversation about how you're going to compensate for that. And I wish that there had been one before they came out of the receivership. We are genuinely concerned about how to do this. We know that there's some buildings happening in the North End that will maybe take on some senior housing. The Knights of Columbus will take on some, but a lot of the residents don't qualify in terms of age, and maybe 20 people will get that. So I need to, if we're going to talk urban renewal and this dedication and your stewardship, how this building is not being accounted for.
Well, I'm not saying it's not accounted for. The city does maintain, but through the D&D, a list of at-risk expiring use projects.
Right.
They're tracked. There could have been city involvement in that conversation. I don't know at this moment.
Sheila's doing amazing.
Yeah,
she's doing her
absolutely.
best. I wouldn't, not even because I worked for her before,
Sure.
but because I genuinely know that they are working very hard. But we're talking about urban renewal and the dedication and stewardship of your agency. And you brought, the building is right here and brought up to me. So I'm asking for what you can do.
Absolutely, and we'll follow up with you. And I think we need to engage our colleagues at D&D for a holistic response to you on that one.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
13As in general. So when
Right.
there is expiring uses, I think there needs to be a question of what you're doing with urban renewal, and as those buildings are coming out, as more will. And some are in your districts for urban renewal and some aren't, but maybe you have an example in your historic documents of when there was a 13A coming out and how you dealt with it in urban renewal before or didn't. But I think this is a learning opportunity. And setting a system, getting ahead of a systemic problem that's going to only increase.
Can I make one more statement? Yeah. So with the urban renewal, it's basically the time period that we gave out the land is what we put in the document. So every time you look at one of these, like the expiring use were the times we didn't put as much in, and they thought that the financing would restrict the affordability, and we did. You have to, every time we have to go back to the documents, so I will look at these documents more closely and give them to the director. But I'm saying it's not like one answer. You have to look at what the documents are, because like if they were done in the 60s and 70s, it's different than when we did them in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
So,
And I appreciate the amount of work that is being done and the amount of research you have to do to even support some of the answers you have today. I do appreciate that. Just know that we really have lost the time and people really have no place to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I just had two other questions actually on the Quincy Market parcels. So Janet, can you explain in detail the billboard issue and how the restrictions apply there that would not be?
If they don't
How
apply,
did that happen?
they're not in the urban renewal.
So, for example, on the urban renewal, what mechanisms was
They're
it
not
being?
part of the lease, it was never taken. That specific part of the building, you see, was notched out, we didn't take Durgan Park.
So,
So urban renewal doesn't control it.
no, I understand, but if one of the other, there was an attempt to put a and this also is BRA owned anyway, so, okay. So meaning it wouldn't really apply in terms of, I guess my question was whether urban renewal restrictions have some sort of visual protection or
They
other
have
ways
signage-
of blocking.
Signage review, so we wouldn't let billboards.
Got it. Okay. And then on that whole site, is the arrangement with the BPDA as lessor, because then the city of Boston still receives the rents from Ashkenazi, or how does that work with the city of Boston owned building when people rent it, for example?
Right. So the unfortunate reality is, this is a frequent topic of conversation at the BPDA. The only rent paid by the lessee of the Quincy Marketplace, Ashkenazi Holdings, and this was the rent settled upon in 1975 when the original lease was agreed to. The rent is $10 a year. And the rent is in total paid to the Boston Planning and Development Agency.
total.
It's $10 a year. It's a source of tremendous frustration, as you may.
That's throughout all three of the buildings?
Yes,
Wow.
tragically and unfortunately.
How long does the lease go until?
99 years. Yeah, it's not good.
Maybe $1,000 after all that.
Yes, we're hoping to kick it up. But I mean, we aspire.
And they were the original, oh no, they took over recently
They're
from someone else, right?
my understanding is they're number 3. Rouse Company was the original developer and leaseholder, followed by GGP, which then conveyed the remainder of the lease. I think there's 50+ years left on the lease to Ashkenazi Holdings. And our Ashkenazi Acquisition, I can't remember the name. Let's just say Ashkenazi. So Ashkenazi's the owner, I think, since 2011-ish. And the lease, the rental payment never changes. It hasn't changed since 1975. There's not an escalator. There's not a periodic revision of the lease. And again, it was agreed to, not to second guess the folks who originally oversaw the redevelopment and the business deal associated with the redevelopment and leasing of Faneuil Hall. It was a brave new world. No one knew if it would work. So to incentivize and entice a developer into turning this into a so-called festive marketplace, the city and the BRA at the time decided to do a lease for almost nothing. And obviously it succeeded beyond probably anyone's wildest imaginations. It was a dilapidated series of structures, and there was no life. It was not a thriving place. It has added a lot to the life of the city of Boston, and I think if people knew today how successful it was going to be, they would have negotiated a different rent package back in '75, certainly one that may have taken into account the fact that it could be wildly successful, and if in that case it is wildly successful, the agency and the city make more money than the $10, but that wasn't in the lease. It's a source of tremendous frustration to us to this day because obviously it's an extremely valuable and successful property. But one important thing as far as the city of Boston proper for people to realize is there is a pilot payment of taxes from the leaseholder to the city of Boston, and that is actually significant money. It's not Chapter 59 taxes, but it is a significant payment in lieu of taxes from the leaseholder to the city of Boston, but not to the Boston Planning and Development Agency.
Okay.
The only thing we make from that property is the $10 a year.
And does the city or the agency have authority over changes to use or development? So for example, with the new Sephora building or cutting down all the trees, were those in conversation with the city and/or you all?
The trees were in front of Faneuil Hall, so that was controlled by the city. But in terms of the lease for the back part that the director was speaking of, we do have authority over that. We do have control, but the developer owners, the tenant, they are trying to work within the lease so they don't have to come for any changes, because they know that when they do come for changes, we are trying to reopen that negotiation.
Got it.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, if they wanted to make a substantive change there, they'd have to come back, we'd reopen the lease, and part of that conversation would be new rent, but we haven't had.
How much is their pilot payment?
It's significant.
It's close to what they would normally be paying under Chapter 59 from what we understand, but we'd have to
Okay.
work with the assessing department to
Yeah,
get the
I
exact-
don't, I will just throw out the guess. It was more than a guess. My recollection when I've asked that question before is that what they pay as a pilot, as opposed to Chapter 59, is probably about 75%, 80% of what Chapter 59 taxes might be.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We can move on to Charlestown.
Okay, back to
Sorry for the
Charlestown?
diversion. Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So Charlestown. Charlestown was originally Charlestown, not all of Charlestown. It doesn't go all the way up to Sullivan Square. That part's missing. And originally, it was without the Navy Yard. Okay? These were the parcels that were proposed. Not all of them became parcels, but some of them. Those are the parcels that were proposed in the original area. We did a major modification in 1976 when we purchased the Navy Yard from the federal government. And this is when it was added. These were the parcels. The way they did the Navy Yard, they just basically have 4 parcels. They have buildings within each, but it's like that building within one of their parcels. And I'm going to go through the Navy Yard pretty extensively. The next one here, so we acquired the Navy Yard by 3 deeds. There's a historic monument deed, there is a public park deed, and a project deed. And that's the project deed, and these are the areas. The yellow is the historic monument area, the red is the public park, and the green is the part that can be developed. So the yellow can be developed, but we cannot sell it. So everything in the yellow are ground leases. And we can sell the land in the green. Okay. Another item that happened when we acquired the Navy Yard was that Massport was claiming rights in the property and holding up our redevelopment of the Navy Yard. And they were also doing a similar thing with BMIP, with EDIC. At the time, we were totally 2 separate, sitting apart agencies. And there was like a 3-party agreement between Massport, the BRA, and EDIC, and it had the mayor's signature as well, where the BRA, the Massport would release all its interest in the Navy Yard. It would release its interest in another parcel, which is shown here in Charlestown, the P8A2, which is in a designated port area. And then there was another comparable agreement on the EDIC side. And then as part of this agreement, what Massport would get would be that they would get this parcel for $1 a year for 40 years. The 40 years is up next year. Okay, and these were the documents. There was a release deed on P-8A2. There was a deed on the Navy Yard to us, and then we did a lease. That's the notice of lease that was recorded. So that's kind of connecting it all. Okay, so now in the Navy Yard. In the Navy Yard, you'll hear a lot about buildings, Building 33, Building 34. Those are, the building numbers are the original numbers that the Navy gave them. They numbered them based on when they were built, so they jump around. Sometimes you'll see a parcel, like parcel 39A, that's a number we gave it. And they're all within the NY1, NY2, NY3, and NY4. Okay, so let's go through some of the Navy Yard. Rope Walk now has a lease on it, has not started construction yet. It's in NY1 along the edge of the Navy Yard. We have the Muster House, that's that little round building, a commercial building, that's in NY1. These are, remember, in the historic monument area that we're going through now, they're all leases, all ground leases. Building 120, another commercial, that's ground lease. 33 was where the BRA used to have offices in the 80s and 90s. It is now housing. It's been converted to rental housing and has some affordability in it. 34 is the building in front of it, which used to have some of our offices. I don't really know what's in there now. 38 is next to the 33 building, and 39 is in front of it. These, again, are still in the historic monument area. Building 150, new building, that's the YMCA building that was next to 38. 39A was built on a vacant parcel that was next to building 39, and it is housing. It has affordability restricted by the BRA. Now we're getting into some of those little buildings in the back. A lot of these are Mass General, Partners, they're all different medical entities. And these are some of the other ones. They're, again, still in the historic monument area and are under ground lease. Okay. Chain Forge building, this is the one, it's got a ground lease now, but hasn't been started. This is where they used to make the chains. The rope walk, of course, they used to make the rope. And this is supposed to be a hotel. Okay. Basilica. Basilica is a housing. It originally started as a rental housing. It is on leased land because it's in the historic monument, and it was like the first condos on leased land in the state, I think. That's what I hear. Building 36 is still in the historic monument area, even though it's jumped across First Avenue. And this actually, I think, had an Urban Development Action Grant from HUD back in the 80s. And I think that's MGH now. This is the public park. This is Shipyard Park, the dry dock area, and the pier where they have the sailing. And that's NY3. Now we're getting into NY4, the development parcels. This is Flagship Wharf at the end of the park area. We have Paris Landing, which is next to that. And these have all been sold. Anchorage Apartments, Building 103 has affordability in it. It's rental apartments. 104 was developed by the bricklayers. Also, it's got affordability in it. The Navy Yard Roadhouse is 100% affordable, 50 units for sale. Harbor View is one of the newer developments that was next to the row houses. And then we have Menino Park at the end. And in back of that is the Spalding rehabilitation. Now we're going to go back to the main part of Charlestown. This is the original plan, remember, without the Navy Yard. Okay, now these are the parcels, and I'm going to include the Navy Yard too. All the dark blue are urban renewal parcels that have been conveyed, either with LDAs, leases, deeds, whatever. They're the urban renewal parcels that are presently out, either developed or being developed. We have 21 leases. We have, which is it 250? I can't see.
290.
290, thank you. Thanks. 290 LDA and deeds. 37 deeds only. These are mainly like transfers to the public, or there were a lot of transfers of little slivers in the back of people's houses for backyards, side yards, that sort of thing. When you see the plan with it all blue, you have to remember a lot of people took those like 200 square feet and they consolidated it with their housing site, so it looks bigger than it is, because when you hit the assessor, it all comes up as blue, but really our restriction is only like on their backyard or their side yard. So you have to watch the plan, and that's why it's really critical when we give information, people know that, oh, it's only their backyard. It's not their house too. Regulatory agreement, we have one. It is North Point, and you'll see that in just a minute. And these don't add up to the total number of urban renewal parcels because there could be several parcels under, one document. Okay, so these are the leases. You can see it's all in the historic monument area and that D8A-1, I think it was, which is the Massport. This is the historic monument area outlined, so you can see. LDAs, they're all over the place, and you can see in the Navy Yard, they're all in the area where we're allowed to convey. The big purple one on this side is the community college. That was an urban renewal parcel. And at the end of the community college, there were some industrial on that. It's called Street A. There's industrial, there's Bridgeview. There's a few parcels along there. And then, of course, across the street, there was the shopping mall. You're going to see a picture of that in a minute. Mishawam, a lot of housing projects there. These are just a couple of the LDAs, Bridgeview. It's one of the newer ones. Bricklayers. Now, Bricklayers is up on Medford Street, on the other side. And the Bunker Hill Mall, that's a urban renewal with an LDA. Okay. These were the ones with deeds only. And what you'll see is you'll see a few little backyards, and then a lot of these are public parcels, and we're going to go through some of the public parcels so you see what was created. The regulatory agreement, the only one, is for North Point. Now, North Point was never an urban renewal parcel until about 10, 15 years ago. We never owned it. We made it an urban renewal parcel so they could get an urban renewal overlay through the zoning, and they got their zoning relief through for the U district, U designation, urban renewal overlay. Those are all the nicknames for it. And we have a regulatory agreement that controls the use. Here's, I think this is that public? These are all the public. Is that what says public, right? Okay. And then we circled all of them that are parks and gardens, and I'm going to show you a few in a minute. So you can see there's Shipyard Park, Menino Park. There's the park across from the high school, which is also the high school fields. There's a garden, I think, at the top, and Peter Looney Park? What's the other one? Okay. There's Peter Looney Park. The Charlestown, this is up north towards Sullivan, the Charlestown Community Gardens. This is in the Navy Yard, the Shipyard Park. The Menino Park's in the Navy Yard. This one is still owned by the BRA. This is the one that's on the edge of the Bunker Hill Mall. We still own that. But you can see it's a park, a little park now. Okay, now, same slide with the public. The circled ones are schools. So we have the community college, we have a parking lot for the Edwards School. I'll show you a slide in a minute. We have the Kent Harvard and the high school. The high school, we only gave a portion of the land. So there's the, and the library. There's the library, it was on urban renewal. The Harvard Kent School, that site was consolidated through urban renewal. Charlestown High School, like I said, it was a piece of that. And then we gave the parking lot out in front of this, the Clarence Edwards School. And of course, the community college. Housing, these are all the housing sites. Some of these might be just individual houses too, like singles, because we gave some sites. Some were just backyards, but some we did for a single family. The bigger, the darker ones on the left-hand side would be Mishawam. I think there's, what is it? Oh, Newtown is the other side, yeah, Newtown. And then there's Main Street Townhouses, Charles Street Gardens were on urban renewal. The Frothingham one was on urban renewal. The affordable housing, these are the places with affordable housing. These are not all the ones that the BRA restricts. Some of these are, the Newtown and the Mishawam are restricted by their financing. In a minute, you're going to see these are our, well, wait, let me show you a couple of slides and I'll show you our deed-restricted ones. This is Mishawam, which isn't controlled by us. Charles Newtown isn't controlled by us, other than it's controlled in that it has to be residential under our urban renewal. We conveyed those earlier on. These are, okay, these are the ones that are deed restricted by the BRA. So you'll see all the ones in the Navy Yard that I was pointing out, Building 33, Building 39, Basilica, 103, 104, the row houses, trying to think what other ones. Those are all deed restricted. They were more recent transfers since the 80s. We started doing our restrictions that you see more commonly in about 87. On the other side, you have Charles Street Gardens, you have Main Street Townhouses, Frothingham, Formax, what's the other one? Oh, the Gatehouse, 75 West School Street, which we'll see in a minute, is interesting because it used to be that it was given out as the Knights of Columbus. The Knights of Columbus in the past 5 to 10 years sold it. It was redeveloped with affordable housing, and the Knights of Columbus picked another site on the other side of Charleston down, and lo and behold, it was an urban renewal site. So they moved from one urban renewal site to another. This is the number of BRA deed restricted units that we have. The total number, how many are home ownership and how many are rental. And those are basically all since 1987. This is a picture of the Main Street townhouses. This is that 75 West School Street that's over by the Bunker Hill Mall on the other side from the community college. Anchorage Apartments in the Navy Yard is affordable housing. The row houses are 100% affordable. Building 33 has affordability in it. Basilica is the ones that are the condos on leased land. 104 is another bricklayers with like 46 units of affordability. So what's left to do as far as these parcels? Certificates of completion, a number are either to be constructed or are under construction. We will have to do notices of extensions of restrictions. Those that we did deed restrict, we did the 30 plus 20 when that 30 years comes up. We are now, as of a year and a half ago, filing notices of extensions of restrictions. We are making sure that they get extended for another 20 years. And I think that's the end. Yep.
Thank you, Janet.
Councilor Edwards? Thank you. So I just wanted to walk through some of, well, actually I have several questions about Charlestown. It's and the Urban Renewal. But before I start, I wanted to not only acknowledge, as the Director Golden had, Chris Breen's work, but to really let him know how good he was as ONS and really being that bridge between I think everybody in Charlestown and the mayor's office. He was excellent at it. We do miss, but we're happy to work with our new person, but we do miss you there. And it's great to see him working on the LDAs and making sure that we have a Charlestown perspective there. So thank you, Chris, for your service. So just specifically, getting right down to, I guess, another lease that you didn't get a good deal on, or maybe you did, on Montego Bay, as it's called, the swap that you had with Massport for that strip of land that lease is coming up this next year?
Oh, sorry, the Subaru site.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes.
Montego Bay, as it's referred to.
I've actually never heard of that.
Yeah, really? Okay,
yes.
Chris, come on, you have a job, Chris. Okay, all right. So in that, as I understand now fully, and I appreciate that background, that it was a swap for the Navy Yard that resulted in a long-term lease for Massport on BPDA land for $1, and with the BPDA then getting the Navy Yard and then having long-term leases there that result in, income from that to the BPDA. So as this lease is coming up and we're talking about urban renewal, again, I think I've asked this question before, I'll just ask it again. How do we make sure that, you had started off the presentation with about community impact, community input, community having a voice. So here comes this lease publicly coming up. Community certainly wants a voice, certainly wants to make sure Charlestown gets more, maybe in this deal. So how do we do that?
Sure. So we're absolutely committed to a community conversation about that parcel as the lease comes due. As you point out, it's imminent.
June, yeah.
So the middle of next year. So there'll be a community conversation. So part of it will be, hey, this is how we came to do this deal with Massport. As you pointed out, a little complicated, involving swaps and different agencies getting different parcels for their own, to attempt to achieve their own goals and objectives. So it'll be a bit of history. It'll be a bit of explanation about what exactly the regulatory overlay is in that part of the world. It sits within a designated port area, regulated by the state, significant marine industrial use requirements. So
And is happening too. I mean, it's an active port area. It's not as though it's died. And
correct.
That's very true.
As you know, in lots of places along the harbor's edge and in East Boston in particular, there are DPA areas where nothing is happening. Yeah. So it's actually being used for a purpose that was envisioned and actually required by state law. So understanding that as the regulatory framework for the parcel, what are our options? And what does the community think about these options? I think that we've talked in the past about Massport's, we haven't had significant conversation with Massport about this, other than Massport's insistence that it plays a key role in the operation of that auto port. So we'll delve more into that as time goes by. But that facility writ large employs a lot of people in a use that is authorized and really is some of the only permissible uses under existing law. So we're dealing with that reality. We'll have the conversation with the neighborhood. We'll have the conversation with Massport. We'll obviously bring our own opinions to the community with regard to whether or not it makes sense to continue that use, to adjust the use, to do something radically different, understanding that if there's a sentiment to do something radically different, it probably requires state legislative relief.
My understanding is that it requires about 10 signatures and a petition that can be put out, and then you submit to the state agency for that relief, at which point the agency would look to Massport, would look to you, and then you make your argument. So the DPA designation can be removed. It's a long, tedious process.
Yeah.
And I think CLF has done that before in South Boston. The Law Foundation it's an environmental law foundation has done that. So it's a process. And before we enter processes to remove and change, I agree with you. I think there should be a holistic conversation of how we got here, and then really a holistic conversation of the opportunities that are available as it stands, and then to see if the community is accepting of those opportunities. But I'm hoping I'm hearing from you a firm commitment that there will be a public conversation.
There will be a public conversation.
Well in advance of the lease expiring?
Yes. It won't be the eve of.
Right. And one thing I would like to think that's also possible in the toolkit that you present to the community, even if the conversation isn't finished, I prefer a holistic conversation, not a rushed one, is that you don't necessarily have to enter into another 40-year lease. You can do a 1-year lease, right, that allows for the conversation to continue, so that when we enter in a long-term lease, community is accepting and benefiting in a way that makes sense. So that I hope is also considered in the toolkit to allow for real conversation and consideration of what to happen there.
Sure, we'll make a very deliberate and intentional decision after this process evolves and concludes. I do just want to make a point that I think we made the last time we had the conversation here at the council on this subject. The parcel, again, writ large, BPDA parcel plus the Massport holding, does employ a lot of people. There are hundreds of people there, so we want to be very careful and very deliberate about our decision over there. Because
completely agree, and for the record, I did meet with, I think it was, what is the name of the company, Chris? It's DP, it starts with a D, I can't remember, but Direct Autoport? Some Autoport company. I did meet with the owner of that, and he talked about his own contracts and his 20-year relationship in Charlestown and the work and the jobs he's provided. So I believe we've had many conversations. We've spoken with Massport, with the BPDA, and also the chief, operator in that area. So there are many interests involved in this. Just want to make sure that folks who in Charlestown also, their interests are also advocated for.
Sure, we understand.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
So you had mentioned also in this, you highlighted the Harvard Kent, the high school, and also, was it Edwards Middle School, or is just?
It was just the parking lot.
The parking lot. And so I'm curious about your relationship and conversations with Build BPS because of the fact that these are in an urban renewal area. They're about to launch what they're going to do and a long 20-year plan for these buildings, for schools, some consolidation, some use, some for the school use. How are you guys talking to each other?
Sure. It's occurring, and I'm sorry that that is one staff member we did not bring with us today regarding the public dispositions of property. So we do have a real estate division.
Yeah. Is it by Devin Quirk?
Yes, Devin Quirk just took over as leader of that shop 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago. And Devin isn't here today, so I apologize for that, but I'm happy to follow up with you on that. that specific issue about how our decisions related to our property that is either near or proximate to BPS property is how that conversation.
So when you said the Harvard Kent, you just own the parking lot near it or the building?
No, Harvard Kent, we gave them the whole site.
The whole site?
Yeah, and
So
I'd have to look at the specific restrictions.
gave it
Sometimes
to BPS?
Sometimes they did it as deed, sometimes they have an LDA, so we'd have to go back and look.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I call up D&D and say, you can't change that without urban renewal, but sometimes if there's not a specific restriction in the deed, they have some leeway.
And the high school is?
The high school was a portion on Medford Street, we gave,
Okay.
not the whole site.
Okay, and I only bring this up because in talking with Build BPS, they've kind of put a moratorium on kind of moving a lot of their properties until they have rolled out their plan and also are able to take a full assessment and accounting of what they have. So just would love to hear about how those conversations are in line with each other. I actually got a question from Representative Dan Ryan about the master planning around the parcels adjacent to the Bunker Hill Community College. Are you guys involved in that? Or he asked me to ask if there's going to be master planning around the parcels.
Oh, I'm sorry, the parking lot.
Parking lot.
So there is not a master planning effort underway there. However, there's significant planning in that vicinity, and it will certainly be a planning site. Those, as you may know, I can't remember, they're two separate parcels. They're over 7 acres. And so it's a significant, vast open space that has been traditionally used for years as a parking lot for Bunker Hill Community College and still is. So as there will be a planning effort. That's not the highest and best use of the property, parking. And given the desirability of that part of the world for development, we think there'd be a lot of interest. There will be a planning study, getting the right mix, the right uses. I think you could pretty much see with great certainty that it's likely a housing development site, and the mayor has often spoken of his desire to see significant affordability as part of the housing that is contemplated for there. But there has not been a planning study initiated there, and for kind of on those parcels for a basic reason. We've got, I think, about 6 different neighborhood planning initiatives, strategic planning areas, we tend to refer to them as, underway, including this downtown planning study. And it's a question of resources, and so we'll get to that, but we just do not have the resources to do all that we would like to do right now.
No, certainly, and there's been a great deal of real push in Charlestown, for a plan for the entire square mile, the 1 square mile that it is, because there's a real question. It's no longer really a blighted area. That, as a whole, there are certain sections, I'm sure, looking at parking lots or under the bridges that you might say highest and best use and whatnot. But there really is a push now to have a plan because there's a genuine concern about how much is happening without a collective vision. So I'm just going to put that out there. Would love to talk to, even though the resources are limited now, looking towards the future or even in the next years or so about how that can be a holistic vision.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be long. I think
For a master plan, though, for the square mile of Charlestown, for all of it.
Yes, I think that's
Okay.
going to happen in the fairly near term. And
Excellent.
by near term, I don't mean days, but I mean in the next year or two, you're probably seeing
See
something like
something.
that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful news. So your role in the largest housing development in New England, and that development is going to kick off. We're having our hearing tonight, and thank you to, I think it's Raul and Ted, who are coming to represent your agency. Tell me how, I understand it's BHA, but it's also about to be BHA, and 2/3 of those units, or a majority, will be market-based, right, ultimately. So when that happens, there's a mix now where the total ownership or stewardship is a little hybrid. You're the planners. What's your role going to be in this? And because it's urban renewal, help me understand what's going to
Sure,
happen.
we have the, I'm sorry?
And that's not urban renewal.
It's, Bunker Hill is not, well, I mean, you highlighted all of Charlestown.
Yeah.
So, and in your map for urban renewal.
But
Yeah,
So this
it's
site
not
is,
urban renewal parcel.
those parcels aren't urban renewal parcels. The one Charlestown?
no, it's 20, I mean, I only say that because the map highlights all of it. There's 27 acres that are covered in the map.
We didn't know, it's not a parcel. It's within the area, not a parcel.
Do you want to explain that? Because
Yeah,
I
you
think that
should.
is
Thank you.
complicated. What is within
I just
an...
looked at your map.
No,
I
you're
just
absolutely
saw the
right, and
colors on
I
the
think
map. I
it
followed the
took me about
color.
5 years to figure this out. There is the urban renewal area
Uh-huh.
has urban renewal parcels within it, which have been identified
That
with
you
different
control.
development goals. Back in the day, when we first spec'd out the urban renewal area, but not every parcel within an urban renewal area is in fact an urban renewal parcel. I know this is brutal, but an urban renewal is big geography, and there are a whole lot of different urban renewal parcels within it that have been identified with planning and development goals, but not every single one in that area. It's just sort of a catch-all.
So your role in this particular development is just your normal role of BPDA and planning with the Article 80 and so on and so forth. You are not looking
Unless
at it
they-
or assessing it under your urban renewal lens and perspective.
Unless they choose to come under
Unless
urban
they
renewal.
choose to come under urban renewal. Why would, just tell me generally, what were the reasons for people to choose to come under urban renewal?
Zoning relief.
Zoning relief. Oh, that's right. So if the developer were to come, if the developer were to need zoning relief, maybe almost a blanket zoning relief, it would be easier to do so under urban renewal?
It might or might not. I mean, they'd have to determine it themselves. But that's right now, so the parcels he's talking about are the ones we acquired. So when we acquire and dispose of them, we control them as they go out. But the parcels that the present BHA project are on, you saw they weren't highlighted, they were never urban renewal to begin with. So
Okay.
there are some areas that we did acquire parcels and we gave them to BHA and they did their projects on them, but this was not one of them.
Would it make it faster? So one of the concerns is the permitting, the variances, all those required to get this done might prevent the shovels in the ground for almost 2 years. And these developments need to be redone, the mold, the asthma cases, what people are living in. And so if they were to, walk me through this, if they were to opt into urban renewal, would that make the permitting faster?
Explain the urban renewal. I'm not going to do 121A, I'm going to do urban renewal. You want to do
Oh,
121?
dear.
Okay, so urban renewal overlay, what that means is that urban renewal overlays are in our zoning. You have to be in an urban renewal area and you have to be an urban renewal parcel. And if you look at the language in Article 3, what it says is your project has to be 100% affordable, 100% for the elderly. None of these are what we do anymore, but there's a last one that says if you have an agreement with the Boston Redevelopment Authority that controls the parcel, you can be an urban renewal overlay. So, for instance, we saw on North Point, they opted to become an urban renewal parcel. We gave them a parcel number, made them a parcel, and they got their zoning relief through the urban renewal. So what happens is they enter into an agreement with the BRA that basically controls it, that and our design review, so it's under total control. These people could, I mean, BHA or whichever group's developing could opt into that, but we wouldn't tell them they have to do that.
No, I know. So now if they opt in, they're an urban renewal overlay district or area.
It's urban renewal, but it's also under the zoning code. It's a combination.
Fair enough. So I have more flexibility as a developer? I'm trying to figure out what does that practically mean?
It's faster because all you have to do is enter into an agreement with the BRA. If you need little changes, it's a matter of amending that agreement.
Oh,
It's not a
instead of
matter.
going back
So
to
what
the
you do is
community.
you.
Yes, simply put, you get it all taken care of at the BPDA. You
Well, wait.
don't go through
But the beginning process isn't just the BPA. So the
zoning commission.
Okay, so what happens is when you're creating it, you come through the BRA, we create a parcel, we recommend to the zoning commission to make it an urban renewal overlay. The zoning commission has to vote that. Once they vote it and our agreement's on, that's when it's easier to amend if something needs amending quickly. Yeah. But
For
the
height.
initial process is
For
not.
height, for density, for all of those things. Once it's an overlay district, it's a matter of a stroke of a pen at that point.
Well, no, votes from our board.
Well, yes,
Right, yeah.
but I mean, you're not
But
coming
it's,
back,
you're not going back to the zoning commission, I
you're
mean,
not going
the
back to the
zoning
community
commission.
or anything like that either.
No, you might be going back to the community.
I-
I think you'd be going back to the community.
Yeah, I think it's
I'm
fair
not,
to
I'm
say.
not opposed to it, I just
Sure,
want to
no.
know how it works.
Yeah.
Because,
No,
I mean,
no, I'm
I'm concerned
saying-
about delay in this project, which I can say confidently, the vast majority of folks in Charlestown want to see redeveloped, they want dignified housing for Charlestown residents. That this is not a controversial
Yeah.
project, but I just wanted to know about how this tool works, if that was something that they opted into.
If it's major changes, I would think we'd have a process. If it's something little, like they're adding one other little use that is in the scheme of things, then I don't think you would, but.
Okay. Well, I'll see you guys tonight, I'll have more questions.
Sorry, thank you. But to answer your question, we would, again, something significant, if the urban renewal overlay was going to be applied, whether the letter of the law requires us to have a community process or not, we'd have a community process over something significant, no question.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Edwards. Councilor Zachem? Good. Okay.
Thoroughly confused.
So I just wanted to return to what Director Golden had been talking about a little bit at the beginning, and actually what Ford had spoken about even prior to that, about the DHCD letter. And I don't know if this is an opportunity to bring Chris into the conversation or as backup, but I want to, because we had reached out and we couldn't quite get in touch with anyone. So on the 3-year marker where there's supposed to be, well, Ford read the language earlier. I have it. I'll have to open it. Where there's supposed to be a
It's page
plan.
2 of the letter from DHCD to us granting the extension. I believe that's what Mr. Cavallari was quoting from.
Yep, so
I just
we'll
had it
submit to DHCD a proposal for what the BRA intends to do with the plans over the remaining extension. Timetable for sunsetting, analysis, framework, and timetable. So last check-in, we had a discussion about how much community input needed to be, to go into prior to the August 2019 date. Any further thinking or?
Yes, so, and I appreciate the question, Madam Chair, and hopefully it addresses some of the concerns raised by Mr. Cavallari and Mr. Laffer as well. I think when we had our conversation about this at our last 6-month update, the concern we had was, should we, before we have recommendations really vetted within the community, should we be going up to DHCD first to see if DHCD was okay with where we were going? Because otherwise we get into this potential for a frustrating conversation in which we engage the neighborhood, we come up collectively with aspirations and recommendations for the way forward on the urban renewal areas, and then we go to DHCD, and DHCD indicates to us that, no, we are not supportive of this, in which case we may presumably have to go back to the neighborhood for additional conversation. Or doesn't it make sense to go to DHCD first, get sort of some parameters from them, and then go explain to the neighborhood what the DHC parameters are, what our goals are, and then solicit support or recommendations from the neighborhood? So we've been going back and forth on that, but I think we are comfortable with the notion that we get maybe we take some soundings from DHCD about what they can and can't live with, but fundamentally I think we're comfortable with the notion we go to the neighborhood then and up to DHCD, but with the understanding we don't know what DHCD is going to do with any of that, whether they agree with us, whether they agree with the neighborhood, whether they agree with our collective assessment of a way forward. So there is that sort of question mark hanging over the process, but I don't see a downside to coming to the neighborhood, saying we've just spent a couple years researching parcel by parcel what's going on in the urban renewal areas. Here's what we think is a healthy way forward with regard to perpetuation or modification or sunsetting of these tools and these areas. and then have the conversation with the community, go up to DHCD. Hopefully DHCD is good with everything that we have collectively arrived at as a future
Could the
proposal.
DHCD reps come down? Are they still here, or? Okay, could you come down and sit? I would love to ask some questions while you're here. That would be
The
great.
one thing I'd like to point out, though, and this gets, I think, to Mr. Laffer's concern about timing, if we have the community process, we're still in fact-finding mode, as we pointed out, we've still got some work to do. Then we get our fact-finding mode completed, where we formulate recommendations internally, our own thoughts about what should happen, then go to the neighborhood. We probably will be bumping up against one of the benchmarks for time, and we may not hit that. That's just matter of fact. So do we want to rush it, or do we want to get it right? We may be back to you asking for an adjustment to the time frame to permit a more thorough conversation. But, you know, the reality is this is extraordinarily complicated stuff. As you've now lived with us on this subject for a few years, parcel by parcel, and this activity has gone on for 62 years. We are processing it, we're analyzing it, we're synthesizing it. Now we have to try and figure out what do you think is the way forward, so that when we come to the community, we can make sense of all this and help them make sense of it. So we may not hit the time frame requirements that we originally aspired to. But maybe we will. I just want to sort of flag it as a potential.
Renee, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, no, other than, I could just tell you a little bit about our conversations over the last few times with DHCD. We've been also working on a process at the BPDA of making sure that when we dispose of urban renewal parcels, that we are also fulfilling a commitment that we made to DHCD about a process that we were going to follow, making sure that we have a proper RFP, appraisals, community input. And so we are just coming across the urban renewal parcels and disposition of those that are coming under this new process. And that's what we've just begun with DHCD. What we do know is that whatever we do, they are requiring of us, and we are requiring from ourselves, a community process. On the proposals that we're going to make that have anything to do with the urban renewal plans, on any RFP disposition of property, we are running a community process, except for those parcels that are so small or that don't make sense, like air rights for cornices or public ways and things of that nature. But we do have that in place, and we are working through that right now as well.
Thank you. Would you both, I really appreciate you coming down and being here and being willing to speak. Could you introduce yourself and your role?
Sure. I'm Christine McClave, Deputy General Counsel at the Department of Housing and Community Development.
And I'm Linda Belzotti. I manage the Sustainability Communities Unit, which Urban Renewal comes under.
Great. So just a few questions while you are here. What is your sense of how the city and council, as the BPDA and council, should be thinking about this 3-year mark, and how complete the proposal should be based on, or how well informed that proposal should be based on public opinion, public process?
I'm not sure that we're totally prepared to talk about that, except to say that, of course, we would expect some community process involvement.
Prior to that?
Pardon me?
Prior to coming to DHCD?
I don't think it matters either way. You know, it certainly would be good to hear from them, like what they have in mind, and then we could sort of give them the 10,000-foot view of whether we think that's an appropriate direction to go in.
And how will you be deciding what the, from the 10,000-foot view, what the feedback should be?
Yeah, we're not the deciders, so I'm not sure.
It would actually be up to, we have a new undersecretary, Janelle Chan. The this agreement originally came under agreement with our previous undersecretary, Crystal Cornegie, so I'm sure any discussions have to go a little bit beyond us in terms of those determinations.
Got it. Okay. So were either of you involved in the last determination letter or approval letter?
Yes.
Okay. Could you help clarify something that's I've been very curious about for years now, about what mere temporal extension means? So there's a line in the letter that said a mere temporal extension would not be a major modification.
Right, that just means if you're asking for more time. If the
Any amount of time? Or I was wondering if mere meant, if it was a 6-month extension to meet to get some more time on deadlines versus asking for another 10-year renewal or 6-year renewal. Would that also just be a minor modification then from that letter?
I don't really know, honestly.
Okay, would that be a question for the undersecretary as well?
Probably, yes.
Okay. Okay. So then returning to Director Golden or Janet, anyone else, so is the LDA inventory fully complete now? Okay.
We have folders on all the parcels, but the next step, of course, is getting them scanned in so we can provide them to people as needed. So we still have all the scanning to do.
Okay.
Or part of the scanning to do.
And it'll be sort of Chris's job to help be the interpreter of the documents also when people reach out, because that was one of the concerns around accessibility was would people be able to understand what they were now seeing? So that will be under your charge.
Yeah, not unlike my previous role as a liaison, similar, just an urban renewal liaison. So, maintaining open and transparent processes, providing information and a little bit more minute detail into whatever the question may be, making sure the website is up to date and accessible as well.
And now, given that you're there and you have great experience and are going to be great at doing it, will there be progress now on moving to put all these LDAs and documents proactively online? We talked about linking it to the zoning viewer, perhaps, or other ways.
I think for right now, I don't want to speak for the rest of the agency, but it'll be, you can go on the zoning viewer, you can click, and there'll be an option that says it falls under urban renewal, and then you will be able to call me, and I'll be able to provide you those documents and a little bit more information and background towards them.
Okay.
Again, I know we had this conversation on a prior occasion. We would love to, from a technical standpoint, to deliver all this information just by clicking around. That you identify the site you're interested, you get the relevant documents. Superficially, sounds easy. I'm assured repeatedly it's extremely complex and will inevitably lead to probably tremendous frustration, understanding what exactly is going on because of the multiple documents that govern a particular parcel. And so we've come to this conclusion that rather than require the interested party to sift through a pile of digital autumn leaves, trying to make sense of it all, that you immediately link to a professional at the agency who can provide you with the documents and walk you through them. That ultimately is a less frustrating reality than if you were trying to make sense of.
I guess I know I feel like we're checking in regularly and having, moving a little bit forward each time with iterations on conversations, but I'm still going to push back and say I think it should be up to the resident to be able to access whatever leaves they want to access and then choose to ask questions if it's difficult for them. It's not, our job as city and as public institutions is to, if someone doesn't feel comfortable reaching out to city government, the BRA, Chris, whoever it is, they shouldn't feel like they need to set up an appointment, or, who knows, there might be some point in the future where all of a sudden there's a lot of interest in a certain parcel, and then you're flooded with people wanting to reach out, and then your time is spread thinly, and, so far there hasn't seemed to have been that much interest in it. But I do think that it's not on us to assume what people will and won't be confused by. It should be accessible, and then they can choose to additionally ask questions to help with interpretation.
Sure, but here's a concern, though. The average person who's looking at, say we give them the LDA, they have no idea, as a general rule, maybe how that LDA relates to other regulatory requirements. And then the question might be, well, why don't you just put all the regulatory requirements in one place? This becomes a really expansive mission creep. And then, so we have to curate a site now that has multiple different documents associated with a given parcel that far transcend the LDA. So the person looking at the LDA says, no, I get this, I understand the LDA, but that person has no idea what else is out there unless we are now in the business of, again, curating.
I think all that requires is a simple disclosure, an asterisk
That says
at the
this may
bottom that
not be
says.
everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the way, everything I said right here, Madam Chair, is we haven't settled on anything.
No,
we
and I
continue to
appreciate-
wrestle with
yeah,
this.
exactly, which is
And
why I'm
maybe
still
maybe we
digging
end
on
up in
it.
a place that you're far more comfortable
Yeah.
with as far as what we're presenting digitally, but we're wrestling with these
Yeah,
misgivings.
and I would love to, so if Chris is the new face of this, I will direct my outside efforts to sitting down with Chris. I just recently, for example, ran into someone from Code for America, and they said they'd love to, talk about what projects we have or have interest in Boston. So this could be, at least from a technological side, to say, can we remove the questions about the feasibility of that, linking the documents and how that would all happen. And then it's really just a policy question of what are you comfortable putting out there. But we're good at, Renee could whip up a disclosure very quickly, I'm sure.
I think the bigger issue is getting them online at this point, too. Council, I think the bigger issue also is getting them all online, what it takes technologically to do that.
So we'll loop in some folks to think about that and talk about that. Okay, and then just my last batch of questions on then the timeline. Director Golden, you had said that there might be some question about the 3-year mark depending on how much community process we're building in. So at what point do you project that you all will be comfortable enough analyzing what's now done with the LDA to be able to come to your own internal proposals, which you would then shop out to community?
We're still gathering, so I think at the current trajectory, which is, it's been a little longer, not a lot, but it's been a little longer than we had originally anticipated. But I think you are looking at maybe a few more months.
Of internal?
Correct.
Okay. So then sometime, I don't know, Q1, Q2, 2019 of being ready for a public process. And how long of a public process would you anticipate given your experience with the previous extension conversation?
Sure, so we're thinking, do we run another conversation or another process similar to the one we did 2 years ago, which is quite lengthy? I don't think we do that, not because we don't want the input. Right. It's just we're going to be way behind in meeting the schedule that we originally spec'd out with regard to our 6-year extension and what are the things we will do, what are the benchmarks within those 6 years. But I think we're looking at months more of process internally, followed by community process. And I mean, really the process internally is continuing to settle up on what it is we have, the facts, what do the documents tell us, but also now that we know, synthesizing them, analyzing them, what are our internal, aspirations going forward, and then we go out to the neighborhood and share those and see if they resonate, if there's pushback, great. But we've got to do that internal soul searching and then engage the neighborhoods. So I think you're talking, several months more for all of that.
So by the next council check-in, you feel comfortable that at least the internal piece will have been completed and maybe a timeline for when you start the public piece.
I'd like to think so, sure.
Okay. Any other next steps before the next council check-in? I mean, there's some of what Janet mentioned of easements and
Yeah, that's all.
completion and
That's in the works
certificates.
right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're really, we're at a good point today because, again, we're about to start the analysis, and that will tell us things we don't know today. It's hard to see where that's going to take us, but we're engaging that process right now. There are still some housekeeping matters that are going to occur, but we know enough to begin to think. We've had some conversations internally about where the sunsetting probably should occur. Probably not quite ripe enough to have the conversation now, but we're actively looking at multiple locations where sunsetting probably should occur with regard to urban renewal areas. Then we'll probably look at some where we don't think the whole urban renewal area should sunset, but maybe pieces of it. That whole, retailering the maps conversation, that'll go on internally, and then we'll be out there with you and neighbors in the community to have the conversation about where they think our thoughts make sense.
You'd mentioned that there's a new process in place now with the state about disposition of parcels. Where are most of the developable parcels located that are still urban renewal parcels?
Want me to answer?
Yeah.
Roxbury.
Okay. Well, so
Based on the things
yeah.
I've seen as I've been going through it,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Okay.
And as you may know,
smaller housing
Councillor,
sites.
some of those parcels have been identified through the Plan Dudley process in particular as disposition parcels. So lengthy community process associated with Plan Dudley examined both some BPDA developable parcels as well as City of Boston DND parcels.
Yep.
And those are being RFP'd right now. So we'll continue to see that activity because, as Janet pointed out, there are quite a few of them in Roxbury principally. They are peppered throughout the urban renewals, but disproportionately in Roxbury.
Okay, great. Well, I see no other questions from my colleagues at this point. So I want to thank Ms. McClave and Ms. Belzati for joining us, and for all of our counterparts at the BPDA, especially Janet, who I know we are going to miss you before the next check-in. You're sort of retiring. I hear you will be kept on in some capacity, but thank you for all you've done for the city for almost 40 years, I hear.
30-something.
30-something. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
We have a few more individuals signed up for public testimony if they were able to still stick around at this point. Thanks for your patience. But I had Jacqueline Yessian and Victor Bronya, and if anyone else wishes to testify, feel free to line up at the podiums as well.
Should I try this one?
Sure.
I'm Jacqueline Yessian, and I'm interested in the Park Plaza urban renewal area, which I understand from looking on their website, it does work. They reported on this urban renewal area at the last time, so I'm wondering if it's appropriate to ask questions about that now.
For public testimony, feel free to ask your questions, and there won't be a chance to get a response, but they're in the public record, and I'll try to get you your response afterwards.
Okay. With regard to sunsetting, over the past 6 or 8 years, the Park Plaza Civic Advisory Committee, which was formed as part of the approval of this particular urban renewal area. In the slides last time, it notes this is the only state-approved urban renewal area. The area was to sunset, I don't have the exact date, but some years ago. And every time we get a chance, we say, you've met the goals. You've done wonderful things here. It's time to sunset it. Please let it sunset. And we thought it had been sunsetted, but it evidently has not. Another further reason to sunset is there's a project at the garage now that does not meet the plan. And the reason we had a plan is to prevent haphazard development. So now there is a plan that in their Article 80 submission didn't even mention that they're in the urban renewal area. And when I raised this at the public meeting, they said, oh, well, we don't have to do anything with that. So anyway, I'm very concerned with the way this particular plan, it's because it's the only one I'm really familiar with. So this particular plan could use some improved community feedback. We didn't even get responses to our questions. So anyway, I thank you again for holding these hearings, because I've been to several, but not the last one. Okay?
Thank you. Victor?
Thank you, Councilor. I'll try to be very quick. My name is Victor Branya. I live at 111 Atlantic Avenue, which is the Mercantile Building, which Councilor Edwards brought into the conversation about the expiration of affordability restrictions. And I first profoundly thank Councilor Edwards for doing that, to bring it into the public conversation. There are 85 affordable apartments in the building. I don't know how many residents in each apartment, but at least 85 will be out on the street unless something is done with the reimposition of the restrictions. Which brings me to a question. If I understood correctly the prior conversation, it was that there might be the possibility of zoning to reimpose the restrictions. I wonder whether there might not be a legal problem. The person who purchases a building with a restriction expiring then is told that you have been rezoned and you cannot elevate to market rates.
I think that's a takings issue.
I would
remember from
hope.
law school.
I would hope that my concern is not well placed and that there is no problem. In which case, I would ask the BPDA to start its zoning department redrafting or drafting appropriate restrictions that can then be opposed. I don't know whether it's the BRA zoning department or the city council's legal department, but it needs to be done in a hurry because the issue will come directly in our face in 3 years. The next question I have is a simple one. What is Chris Breen's contact information so that we can reach him? Is it Chris or Christopher dot? It's Chris. It used to be. Okay. And Breen is spelled?
B-R-E-E-N.
E-E-N. Okay, thank you. No more questions, Councilor.
Thank you. So chris.breen@boston.gov, or at BPDA? At boston.gov, for all interested parties. Ford, yes.
Could I make one?
Yes, sure.
Is there a microphone that works, or I don't know? Hello? Okay, great. First of all, I think the BPDA does great work, and all the LDA collection, I know it's hard work, and I want to give them credit, and everyone in this room knows I'm a big fan of Brian Golden. But I do want to just keep us remembering that in the last discussion about the urban renewal zone extension, the big elephant in the room question is, do we need this? When development appears to be going on mostly in places that are not urban renewal zones, East Boston, Widett Circle, Alston, Brighton, no urban renewal zones there, yet somehow they're able to figure out how to do affordable housing, how to have development projects that run in an orderly fashion. I really do want to keep us thinking about the big picture question. Do we need these artifacts of 1957? The toolkit that's talked about is replicated in all these other neighborhoods where you don't have urban renewal. And in fact, you know, having listened to all the testimony, the questions from Councilor Flynn and Councilor Edwards on the LDAs, which sort of surprisingly expired, and Victor was just pointing out, sort of as a proof point that maybe this old artifact of 1957 LD, very convoluted process, a process so convoluted, most of the experts in the room couldn't even give us answers to a lot of questions asked. Maybe it's not the best way to be managing this if we're losing track of these important deadlines. I really think that we need to take a step back and understand that, we could listen to all of the good work about how the LDAs are being inventoried, but do we really need such a complicated system when in fact many parts of the city seem to be operating just fine without it? And I just want to make sure we all think about that as we mull the sunsetting of all these zones, we hope sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ford. All right, last call for public testimony. Well, thank you all for joining us. This will conclude today's hearing on docket number 0267. This hearing is adjourned.